feel the sound a lot stronger than I hear it. I'm convinced that if you're trying to listen to what you're doing, it's too late, because your finger's feeling the sound too. And so it can make that adjustment faster than your ears can hear it.
I was headed to be the guest artist for the Las Vegas Bass Workshop at the beginning of 2018. And when I mentioned that to International Society of Bassists General Manager Madeleine Crouch, she said, why don't you see if Gary Karr is available, Gary Karr and Harmon Lewis, and maybe you could stop by and hang out and do an at-home with Gary Karr episode. And that's exactly what you're hearing today. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations. Gary Karr, if ever there were a man in the bass world that needs no introduction, it would be Gary Karr. The super short version would be he's the person that brought the bass to prominence as a solo instrument in the 20th century. And he has not slowed down at all. It's remarkable to see what Gary's up to. We dig deep into this new project that Gary's working on, which is a concerto. It is going to be debuted coming up here in 2018. And we spoke about it briefly during our last interview, which was at the ISB 2017 convention. So we go into that. We talk about method books. We talk about all sorts of fascinating details about proprioception and all sorts of other topics. You're going to love this conversation. And we're just chatting in Gary and Harmon's living room in Las Vegas, looking out over this beautiful vista where Gary practices every morning. Just such a beautiful setting. And we're hanging out with his dogs. You'll hear his dogs make an appearance from time to time. We're drinking coffee. What an honor and a privilege, and what a great time to hang out with Gary in this way. And we've got some great folks supporting the podcast here. I'd like to thank Upton Bass, D'Addario Strings, and A440 Violin Shop. More on all of them later. Before we get rolling, however, I really want to encourage everybody. Like I said at the beginning, Madeleine Crouch of the ISB, the International Society of Bassists, this was her idea. And Gary Karr was the founder of this organization. And we just had our 50th anniversary convention in 2017. If you're not a member of the ISB, I would love to have you join us and join Gary and join all these amazing people that we chat with each and every week here on the podcast. It's such a fabulous organization. We inspire, educate, and connect. Those are the three words that make up the motto of the ISB, and that happens on a daily basis. In this organization, you'll join thousands of bass players from across the world, and there are so many wonderful benefits from joining the ISB. You can be listed in the teachers directory. You can be listed in the luthier directory. You get access to the membership of this organization worldwide. You can get in touch with bass players when you're traveling. So useful. You get Bass World Magazine, the only magazine, print magazine, dedicated to the bass. You get exclusive access to video libraries of our past conventions and presentations. You get access to everything that the ISB has published. It's amazing. I use that all the time. When I'm researching a guest, I go on and I search for Gary Karr. A lot comes up if you search for Gary Karr, or I search for whatever. It's such a wonderful organization with so many benefits, but the most important thing is just this community and being a part of something like this. You can join by going to isbworldoffice.com or just search for the International Society of Bassists. And if you join, send me a message and I've got something special to send to you. All right, here we go with this wonderful episode at home with Gary Karr. I'm thinking the chronology. So you were the principal sub for the Met. Mm-hmm. When was that? Do you remember the years or the date range?
61. Let's see. 61 and 62.
Okay.
Then I got a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation to commission Henza. And part of the stipulation in the contract was that I'd have to give up all orchestral work and focus on solo.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So I couldn't do that anymore.
Well, explain what you did growing up in Los Angeles, though. A lot of people criticize Gary and say, well, he has no orchestral experience. How many orchestras a week did you play in?
Yeah, 7.
You're playing in 7 orchestras?
Mm-hmm.
How old were you when you were doing that?
As soon as I could drive.
Really?
15 and a half.
15 and a half, playing in 7 orchestras? Going to high school still?
Yeah.
Out super late, playing concerts and coming back and...
Well, concerts usually on weekends.
Yeah.
Yeah. But super late doing rehearsals.
Who were you studying with when you were in Los? I mean, everybody knows the sort of the story of the family of bass players and everybody, but like in that time period when you were playing in all those different orchestras, who had you been working with on the bass?
Well, I started with my first teacher was the same teacher that taught my grandfather, my uncle, and my cousin.
Really?
And he came over to the United States, landed up in Los Angeles from Russia, where my family came from. And my teacher, and my grandfather were boyhood friends.
Okay.
But they took a different journey. My grandfather spoke 7 languages fluently, and my grandmother too. So when they left Russia, they went to Paris. They spoke French, so they were able to get out and still eke out an existence in France before coming to New York. And my teacher, Yuda Demenstein, my grandfather's buddy, he and his wife went through Shanghai, as did a lot of Jews from Russia. They went to Shanghai first, and then ended up not in New York, but in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And by coincidence, he lived across the street from me.
Okay.
Which was a great thing because he was long retired when I started studying with him. He was already an old man with a heart condition. So he couldn't go out very much, but he managed to come across the street every day, and always greeted me when I came home from grammar school. And I practiced with him. You know, it was the greatest teacher I can imagine all those years. Having your teacher by you when you're practicing, he put me through my paces like a trainer.
So you're practicing together. What were you working on?
Simandl.
Simandl, really?
Hated it.
Really? And how ironic that you're the pictures demonstrating, years later.
I think Simandl is one of the worst things that ever happened to the bass today. I mean, that's what I just don't understand why that became the Bible. It is so bad.
Why did it become the Bible?
I have no idea. Because the strongest influence on bass playing, I think in the United States, probably globally, which also is very odd, maybe even ironic, was German. Mm-hmm. The Germans really, really had a stronghold on the development of the bass, and they all used Simandl. Mm-hmm. But Simandl was Czech, so, I mean, what did that have to do with Germany?
Right.
And the Czech bass players at that time and subsequently were far more advanced than the German bass players because they had gone beyond Simandl already, but the Germans didn't. So we were stuck with the German school in the United States. The Japanese were stuck with the German school. And the Simandl, one of the difficult problems with the Simandl, there's a couple problems, but Simandl doesn't cover the whole fingerboard soon enough. Mm-hmm. And so they have you playing in all the low positions, never using your third finger, and all of a sudden when you get to the higher positions, you're supposed to have a strong third finger, never having used it.
Yeah.
Which is already a weak finger to begin with. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people who studied Simandl developed really good first, second, and fourth fingers, and never was able to have a third finger. That's my problem. Do not know how to just go for a note in the upper positions with my third finger. I can't do it.
First and second?
It's always first and second.
Yeah.
I even use my fourth finger in upper position because it's a lot stronger than my third. That's one of my complaints. The other thing is the intonation is just ridiculous in Simandl. To play in tune between 2 and 4. I mean, you have a finger in the way. So if you want to play a high like a seventh to the octave, a high seventh, raised seventh, with your second finger, and then you have to play like E to F. It's never high enough.
Right.
Got a finger in the way.
Yeah.
So so intonationally, it's wrong. It's really bad. Another reason I can go on and on.
Please.
It goes.
Oh, thanks.
It goes half position by half position all the way up, and it covers one string at a time. And so it doesn't really have you crossing all the way to the E string when you're doing all these positions. So most Simandl people, if they play a C on the G string, they have no idea what the second finger note on the E string is in that position.
Right, because you learn it in these separate contexts.
Yeah. And that's why I always loved jazz bass players, because they knew, and that's one thing that they knew that I didn't know. So I learned from them how to figure out what all the other notes were. And I was probably one of the first old people to do a lot of stuff on the E string all the way up, because with the bow, because it's so practical. So that's another reason I hate Simandl. I think that the 1-2-4 system is ridiculous. It should be. Yes, if you're, sometimes it requires a big stretch to do 1, 2, 3, 4. Some people do that, can do that if they have a big enough hand. And if they have a big enough hand, they should do it. If you don't, 1, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 4 combinations. And it works fine. You just have to learn it.
So 1, 2, 4 or 1, 3, 4, depending on context. And then I think about like belay, for example. I'm talking to some people who study that.
1, 3, 4.
1, 3, 4, and then talking to some people, because it's all written 1, 3, 4 in those books.
Yeah.
Then when I've talked to people who are immersed in that world, they say, well, it depends on context. It depends on the harmonic context. 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4, which is just what you said.
Yeah. Belay, I like belay a lot better.
Yeah.
Because there is a flexibility there. And but I certainly like belay because he develops your third finger early enough.
Yeah.
I have one fingering for a scale, for a major scale. It's so easy. 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4.
The electric bass world would understand completely.
Where do you think I got it?
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
And I got it from electric bass, and you can play absolutely any scale on the bass with that fingering.
So you'll use that if you were just going to play a C major scale on...
I would never do Simandl. I do that electric bass finger for sure.
Since we're talking about some of the traditional bass methods that that've been around, what else did you grow up with, maybe etude wise, and then what else have you experimented with? And I know people would love your thoughts into some of those things that we all have on our bookshelves.
Well, my teachers were old fashioned.
Yeah.
And so along with Simandl, I did the 30 etudes of Simandl with my first teacher. Then when he died, I studied with another man who taught my uncle and cousin. Same guy, Herman Reinshagen, who was assistant first in New York and with a Phil, and retired out in Los Angeles. And he taught just about everybody in Los Angeles. I mean, he was one of the major teachers there, and including jazz musicians. Like I think I told you, I followed. It'll come to me later. One of the top jazz bass players from the time, Charlie Mingus.
Oh, Charlie Mingus! Yeah. Charlie Mingus studied with Reinshagen.
So I would go to my lesson, and Charlie Mingus would be coming out. So I rubbed shoulders with him all the way in. Anyhow, so Reinshagen, and and gave me, I would do my solos, but I always had to do the etudes too. So I went through Storch Rabe, all the books. I did, then Sankey too. I did all the Gradus and Parnassum. I did the Findeisen etude books. And after I was no longer studying with bass teachers, I still would refer back to the etude books, but in a totally different way because, as I mentioned, I transpose lots. So I take Storch Rabe, for instance, and I'd read through the whole thing, transposing it into a different key, or I would play the whole book an octave higher. I do stuff like that.
Thinking of up an octave higher, thinking of it like as it would be down an octave, just sort of like taking it up.
Yeah, just read it up. Yeah. And so it was good exercise of the mind, but also it was great for technique because I'm expanding it all the time, using the same resources, but in different ways.
Yeah.
And the result of that was kind of interesting because with my own students, if I would give them a Bach suite to learn, and because the students today, they don't want to spend much time on etudes. They want to get to the meat and potatoes right away. And for them, the meat and potatoes is maybe one solo, but mostly orchestral excerpts.
Right.
But I always insisted on Bach. I felt that was, if you're not going to do etudes, you should at least do your Bach. And what I do on the Bach, I say erase all the, don't do any of the bowings marked.
Start fresh.
And put in your own bowings. And bring them in. I want to see what you can do. So they bring it in. They'd play it for me. And then I take my big fat eraser and get rid of all the bowings they put in. I said, okay, now bring it back next week with a new set of bowings. And I'd make them do that 3 times. And that's an etude. I mean, that's how you learn.
That's a etude for sure, and that's like a deep. I remember talking to Ed Barker, who's the principal of bass for Boston, and he talked about practicing like that and varying it. It's like having a ball of clay, and you make like a crease in that ball of clay, and every variation you do, like it's like you're widening and deepening that.
Well, that's a nice way to put it.
So in terms of Bach. And fingerings, like bowings or experiment. Would you put fingerings in for people, or would you have them come with it? Yeah,
rarely, because I feel that the biggest challenge of playing the bass is bowing. I've never found fingering to be much of a challenge, especially with my weak third finger. I mean, you can you can do almost everything on the bass with 2 fingers. I mean, I never found fingering very interesting or complicated. But bowing was always a big challenge. And so every time they changed the bowing in the Bach, they'd have to change their fingerings. Because if you're going to put a bunch of notes under one bow, you want to stay, you don't want to move around with your left hand a lot. So you'd have to figure out ways. The only interesting thing about fingering was the 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. That apart from that, and learning where all the other notes are on the lower 2 strings. Never found much of it. I don't think,
It's so easy to get caught up in fingerings, though, right?
I think everybody, all the books do. And
right.
I find that really distressing because of all the string instruments, the bass is by far the most difficult one to bow. And
I think we know why, but like, what are some of those reasons?
Well, first of all, the string responds slowly.
Yeah.
And the strings are fat and big, and it takes a real understanding to get them moving. And conductors have traditionally, I don't know if you ever read the article I wrote for the Strat about conductors, how stupid they are.
But maybe to describe some of those reasons.
Well, lots of things happened. I mean, in Europe, beginning of orchestral playing, and I'm talking about early 1800s, late 1700s. Conductors most of the playing, of course, was German bow. So, and the conductors would see the cellists moving, and they wanted the bass players, they wanted more sound from the bass all the time, and so they figured out the way to get more sound is to use more bow. So they were always asking for more bow, which is the wrong thing. If you wanted more sound, you use less bow, get closer to the bridge. But that was their solution. The result was that all the German bow makers, like Fretschner and all, they made these stupidly long bows, and to satisfy the conductors, and then of course they'd have to use more rosin because the bow doesn't want to go that fast across the string, so you'd have to put more rosin on. Well, that created a whole traditional way of bowing the bass, which is wrong to begin with. I think
which is still very present,
and it's still very prevalent.
And we, Gary and I were just looking at his Jim Ham bass and the string spacing, and how much closer together is than what you see on a lot of basses. And he was just describing why basses are spaced so widely and how it's from. Can you just describe the gut tradition and how they sort of come down?
Well, there were lots of things that gut, because I learned on gut, so I spent most of my youth with gut strings, and. You needed wider spacing because they moved. Well, first of all, they were thicker. The strings were thicker, so they took up more space.
Right.
And then they swang more, and also they had to be higher off the fingerboard a little bit too, because they weren't quite as tight, as taut as a metal string. That was my experience with that, and then. What they did for the lower strings, like if you wanted your strings a little bit closer, so they did these cutaway fingerboards. So the top two strings were like a normal fingerboard, and then they would drop the fingerboard suddenly for the lower two strings. For years, you couldn't even buy an ebony fingerboard to put on your bass that didn't have that drop away lower two.
Really? That was just the convention.
That was convention. I don't know how it took them a long time to wake up to the fact that you don't need that cutaway with metal strings. And there were other things like the basses were manufactured with small end pins. They were the longest was 6 inches, or maybe 6 to 8 inches at the most. That was it. That's all you can get. You couldn't even buy one longer. And, of course, bass players kept getting taller, too. And so they're bending over their instruments, and that became a way of playing. I couldn't believe it. I mean, there were schools where they bend over with the instrument, and they keep the instrument from twirling around by holding their foot on the bottom of the instrument, and stuff like that. Very strange postures. All having to do with the fact that they never thought of really raising the bass higher so they could stand taller.
Well, and if you think like about if you took the bass away from someone standing like that in that posture and holding that posture for any period of time,
it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And then so I wrote an article in International Musician. This was like in the early '60s about that. And then suddenly you can buy, after that, fortunately some bass players, especially tall ones, said, oh God, this sounds like good. We better get one of these long ones. So they had started manufacturing long end pins. But that was the beginning of that. And then you came in with that wheel. Nobody had wheels.
Right.
I one of the first ones ever really developed with that airplane wheel on it was in Wisconsin. That was in... the first ISB.
Yeah, really?
The first, it's a 67.
Oh.
That was the first one that had that, that's from an airplane.
Yeah. It's a great invention. You saved a lot of bass players' arms.
Yeah, but I said, because bass players always complain about a bad back and so on and so forth. And I thought, well, I mean, if you're standing up in proper posture, why should you have a bad back? But then I realized, you have bad back from carrying the bass.
Yeah.
I mean, think of all the times you're carrying that bass. You're really putting a strain on your back, and there's no easy way to carry the bass. Probably the most efficient, ergonomic way of carrying a bass is on your back. But who does that?
Right. That's been a total lifesaver for me, that sort of wheel. And I love that tall airplane wheel, especially having lived in Chicago and dealing with the snow. I could get through the snowbank much better.
And it was another thing in Reinshagen, my teacher, I said, when I came to his house with the wheel, he was just aghast. He said, "What?" And he was kind of shocked because by then, Stenholm was the guy in Wisconsin. Robert Stenholm.
Okay.
He also made machines.
Yeah, I was going to say the Stenholm extent. Okay.
Yeah, extension. He was the first one to make a really proper wheel that with this airplane design.
Yeah.
His had a spring in it too.
Really?
Yeah, so a shock absorber. It was really good. What was I saying?
Wow.
Oh yeah, so Reinshagen. So when he saw this wheel, pulled up with a wheel, and he never saw that before. That was my own invention because I'm such a lazy kid. You have no idea. So I made one. I made a wheel. It was just a little wheel, but I just figured out a way to stick it into my end pin. And in those days, we didn't even have end pin. When I bought Reinshagen's bass, it didn't even have an end pin that you could raise or lower. It was there was no screw on it. So with the bass, I got 6 wooden carved end pins.
Wow!
Each one for different heights.
Different heights. Okay.
So he saw that, and I said, "Well." Then he told me. I said, "Well, how did you carry your bass in New York all those years?" He said, looked at me in amazement. "Carry the bass?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "We never carry the basses. We always had bass carriers. These were professional guys. They were union."
I remember hearing about that. Yeah, talk about a different era.
Different era. Union carriers. Yeah. He never carried a bass in his life.
Oh. Yeah. Can you imagine?
I don't think I would have retired so early if I could afford a bass carrier.
Right. That changes the game.
That changes the game.
Yeah.
One thing that has impressed me about Upton Bass ever since I got to know them was how many artists there are out there that are so satisfied with the work that Upton has done for them. Here's Lucia Torino of The Devil Makes Three, outstanding band, on her experiences with Upton.
I have the Upton travel bass. A friend of mine who was in a band called Brown Bird, I think she'd had some work done on her bass, and she had a pickup that she got from Upton, and she knew one of the guys who worked down in the factory in Mystic. Also, calling it a factory is really charming because it's really just a barn that smells amazing with lots of cool basses and very sweet men. Chris Wood, I think he had 2 Chadwick basses with him, and so I got my courage up and sort of sidled over to him at one point and was like, "I need a bass. What should I get?" And I talked about Chadwick and about Upton, and he was like, "Honestly, I'd go with the Upton."
Learn more at uptonbass.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast, guys.
Well, we were talking about rosin, too, and the soft rosins and how that's kind of a holdover from the gut string era.
Soft rosins were used because one of the problems, like oak rosin was very popular at the time, was they put something in the rosin to keep it from powdering. Because when rosin powdered on the gut strings, not only did it eat it up and then the string would start to unravel, but it's a scratch. You would make a scratchy sound. So you wanted to minimize that. I mean, there would always be a modicum of powder on the string, but it didn't have to be so much.
Right.
And so that was why we used the soft rosins. And I remember, the days where if you left because this is Los Angeles, and if you left your rosin in the car, a parked car with all the windows up, you came back and it looked like it had been fried.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really soft, and that was oak. And then when they changed to metal strings, they didn't change the formula because metal strings ate up the rosin faster than gut, and so they were selling more of it, so why change it? They thought they were onto a good thing. So it never changed. All the bass rosins from that point on all had some kind of softness to it. And I started using cello rosin early on, when I changed to metal strings because cello Rosin did powder, and I didn't like that very much. But I didn't use that I didn't use a lot of it. And the other thing is I was determined to, since I had to learn something my teachers didn't teach me, how to project a sound above a symphony orchestra without straining. And I found the only way to do that was, there was no other choice. I had to learn how to play closer to the bridge than I had been taught. Mm-hmm. And if you used a sticky rosin, the bow would not move. Yeah. So I had to do a harder rosin that would allow me to go closer to the bridge. And then the company, this was a French company that put out Bernadelle rosin. Then they made a bass rosin with the same basic formula as cello, although a darker sap, which worked really well. Works really well. That's what I've been using.
And you made that transition from gut to steel. And
then I had to do from rosin to rosin.
Rosin to rosin. And making that transition, you just shared with me about Stuart Sankey, kind of. That was the first public performance on steel strings. He was involved. So can you tell that story?
It was in Aspen, and I had to play in the student concert. And the day before the concert, he put on steel strings. And I never played on steel strings before. And so I had to make that transition really fast. And I hated him for it. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I look back very favorably on it. I think he made me very flexible. And then before my town hall debut, he changed bridges on my bass. That was the same day.
The same day?
Same day.
Why did he think you needed a new bridge all of a sudden?
I have no idea. I don't know whether it was a bit of sadism or being a good teacher. But in the end, I learned from it because I had to adjust. It was not like my other bridge, and so I had to adjust very fast. And
when Gary had the Gusovinsky bass, he traveled with 5 bridges.
For different climates?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I had a jack that I just put it underneath the bridge, jack it up, remove it, put the other bridge down.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it only took me 30 seconds. Actually, it was a lot more efficient than those adjusters.
Mm-hmm. And didn't cut the sound.
And I did have adjusters on my bass early on when they came up with the idea of adjusters. Mm-hmm. I tried it out, and first of all, I was unhappy about the fact that it took so long to change the height of a bridge. It wasn't an easy fix. So I wondered, gosh, I mean, I think I could change a bridge faster just by doing it manually, one bridge to another. Mm-hmm. So that didn't seem to be that much of an improvement. But then when I started becoming really sensitive to playing closer to the bridge and all this kind of stuff, I realized that those adjusters interfered with the way the bow felt on the string.
Really?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
It was like, I think I mentioned it at the...
Oh, in your speech, yes.
In my speech, it was like taking a bath with your socks on.
Oh, yeah.
It's,
That's right.
It feels good, but it's still, there's something in between doing the right thing. Sound-wise. And I hate playing on basses with adjusters. I've had to do it. I really hate it. I just don't like the feel at all. I'm very proprioceptive. That's a term I use a lot. On the way I think I feel the sound a lot stronger than I hear it. And I mean,
you feel it before you hear it.
Yeah, I'm convinced that if you feel the sound, if you're trying to listen to what you're doing, it's too late.
Yeah. Are you feeling the sound? Are you feeling the vibrations from the instrument? Or are you feeling like the air moving, or some sort of combination?
All of the above, but mostly the bow.
Right, vibrations going through
the bow. If you're sensitive to the way the bow feels on the string, that kinetic energy that we were talking about, the way. If you feel the way that contact and the way the bow vibrates, that determines the speed and the amount of weight you need to put on the bow. All that. If you become sensitive to that, it's very, very physical. Mm-hmm. And then you have, in addition to that, the bass leaning against your body. So you're feeling it all along your body. Mm-hmm. And then standing up or sitting down, you'll have a knee stopping the bass from turning, so they get it over there too. The ground you're standing on, I always love to play on a podium.
Yeah.
I did that mainly because I want to raise the F holes a little bit, because the violins are up here and then the bass F holes are way down there. And I thought, no, I think I should be the same height as the conductor. It'll project better. What I loved standing on a podium is the podium vibrates and my feet are getting a nice massage while I'm playing. I love that feeling. Yeah. So I'm getting all this feedback, all this physical proprioceptive feedback. It's just really wonderful. And
tell about Hector.
Yeah, Hector Tirado. He's a guy you should interview. He's so interesting.
Right. Yeah.
He is astoundingly deaf. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are different levels of deafness, but he's way down there. And even wearing super audio hearing aids, he still can't hear you too well. He reads lips. And he studied with me when I taught at Yale, and then subsequently came to many of the Karr camps. And first of all, he produces the most beautiful sound on the bass. It is so warm and so gorgeous. And then when he studied at Yale, he would come to the lesson and he'd play, and the sound was always nice, but there was something wrong, something missing. I always felt it, coming from such a similar kind of approach to the bass as he had to do. I said to him, would this be insulting? I felt very embarrassed about asking him, do you mind taking your hearing aids away? Just put them on the stand and then play this again. He played it again. The sound exploded. It was the same gorgeous sound, but so much bigger and so much more projecting.
And it was in tune.
And the intonation was so much better. And I said, from now on, you can leave your hearing aids at home. When you come for a lesson, read my lips, but I want to hear you play without it. So he this is the way he played, and it was really absolutely fabulous. Then we did a concert in Victoria during Karr Camp. We do a concert. We did an annual concert every year. He and I played duets together, and we rehearsed on the stage in the hall. And I wasn't looking at him, and his sound was so small. And I said to him, and I looked up, and he had his hearing aids on. I said, would you take those out? And Harmon was in the audience, and several people all the class was in the audience for the rehearsal. He took them out, and again, the sound exploded, and it equaled mine, and it was just perfect. Wow. Such a big difference.
Yeah. But the amazing thing was the way it changed the intonation. And Gary still says to this day, you feel intonation, you don't hear it. You can't change it after you've already heard it.
Your finger can make a very fast adjustment, because your finger's feeling the sound too. The strings vibrate a lot under the finger.
Right.
And so it can make that adjustment faster than your ears can hear it. So he's written about it. And it's really interesting. When he plays with piano, I asked him, how do you hear the piano? Because he can't.
That's the amazing part.
And he said what you just said, which I never realized. Probably I do too, but I never had to really refine it to the degree he did. I get it from the air.
So that proprioceptive, because the sound waves coming
The
to
sound
you.
waves. He can
Well,
feel
Hector
it.
described it very well to me. I said, how do you always know? Because I don't play with a bass player with line of sight.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's too late if you wait till you see me.
Mm.
I don't want anybody giving me nods and so on and so forth. I look away from them because you can feel it better and be more accurate.
Wow.
And Hector said, I just feel the air from the piano. When you're ready to play, I know that you've come in and that it's there.
Did you always have that proprioceptive? I love that word too. That's a great word. Was that something you always sort of intuitively got, or do you remember that becoming more in harmony with that at a certain point in your life?
I was never aware of what I was doing. It was instinctive.
Okay.
And it was so instinctive that it wasn't until I started teaching, probably, that I had to formulate it in my mind what I was doing.
Yeah.
And the instinct was there day one because I had a wire tape recorder a performance of me at 9 years old. And the sound was sound was my sound. And it was different from anybody in my family.
Yeah.
And that sound is a physical thing. It has nothing to do with a concept. It's a feeling.
So like Hector, taking out those hearing aids, he tapped more fully into that, and all of a sudden everything came alive.
Yeah.
And so another student maybe with the hearing issues, how do you get people to tap into that? That's so cool. I mean, I think when I'm really in a good state of flow and everything, I'm feeling that too. I'm feeling the vibration from the bow. I'm feeling the air. Did you find any techniques or ways to get students to sort of get into that?
Yeah. Well, during Karr camp, we used every morning we did an hour and a half of exercises all together. The vomit was the.
And so vomit
is a physical exercise, nothing to do with fingering.
Yeah. It's another, which is another. It's easy to think it's just that, right?
Yeah.
It's
not. Right.
It was misinterpreted. It's been misinterpreted by so many people. Like Braditich teaches it as a finger thing. It's not. It's a bowing exercise. It really is a challenge to the bow. All shifting on the bass it's wrongly perceived as a left hand maneuver. Shifting is a right hand maneuver, and once you understand that, it's so much easier. But you have to practice shifting an awful lot with your left hand because you don't know what you're doing with the right, and it takes forever to really get a sense of what's happening. But in actuality, what you're doing is refining your right hand, but you don't know it. Why not know it and do it right from the beginning? So shifting teaches you bow placement and bow speed. And because you're shifting from a low note to a very high note. So you have two distinct different speeds.
Yeah.
And the closer you can get to the bridge while you're doing it, the less the ratio. And that's what you are aiming for. So we would do that. I would have done it faster, but the class determined the tempo of this thing, and our vomits, believe it or not, lasted 45 to 50 minutes of the hour.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we would do. Then the other technical thing that I would do for the warm-ups would be, again, bowing. I think the hardest maneuver on the bass is bird claw. Hardest maneuver on the bass is string crossing.
String crossing, yeah.
Yeah. For the same reason as vomit is hard, because you're doing two speeds. Well, when you're crossing strings, you have to be sensitive to the different response you get from each string, because it's much more definitive than it is on a cello or violin. You can practically, well, except for the C string on the cello, which most cellists play poorly because they don't slow the bow down enough to get a good sound. But on the violin, you can go to the G string on the violin and still draw it pretty much at the same speed as the E string, and get a fairly decent sound. It would be better if you slowed it down for the E, but you still can. The ratio is much closer. But the bow changes is taught in all these books because the bow's moving so fast.
But when it's moving...
If its bow's moving at the right speed, you don't have to teach a bow change.
Because you're in...
You're already slow.
Yeah.
So my bow changes are very slow. So what's there to do? I hardly do anything. My teacher, Herman Reitzagen, used to criticize me for that. He told me, when you go to New York, they're going to make fun of you for not using more wrist in your right hand. I remember him telling me that.
Wow.
And so I would have, because that's in the Simandl, you have to go move your wrist like that. And I never understood that. The wrist should be relaxed all the time and flexible.
Yeah.
But it certainly shouldn't be used to begin a bow change.
Mm-hmm. Are you, when you're and I know you're feeling the sound, that whole proprioceptive, when you're moving that bow. I mean, I think I'm bringing this up just because I think students they see the hand and they think that that's like the initiator of the energy. That's what's bringing out. Like, what is there a part of your body in general that you're thinking about? Like, as you're making a bow change, is it just everything? Is it your back, the shoulder,
mostly the back?
The back. Okay.
Back and shoulder.
Back and shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do minimal motion in my arm. Mm-hmm. My elbow doesn't move much, and my wrist doesn't move much. All the power comes from the back.
Yeah.
But again, the reason I use my back is because it puts more weight on the bow, which makes it move slower. Mm-hmm. I don't want a fast bow. If you use a fast bow, you really are cutting off your back. You can't use a fast bow if you're using your back. But if you want to slow the bow down, a good way to do it is just concentrate on the back, and it automatically slows it down because the back doesn't move that fast.
Yeah, yeah.
A struggle that people who teach young bass students, and there are more and more of us every day that are doing this, a struggle that these folks have is finding strings for these small basses, the 16th size basses and even smaller. Here's Kate Jones, who is a Suzuki bass specialist, on how she's enjoyed using D'Addario's fractional helicore strings.
Recently, I've had the opportunity to try out D'Addario's new 1/10/1/16 crossover size string for fractional basses. The things that I love about this string is that it's got a beautiful tone, and for tiny humans, the strings have to be easy to push down, which these strings are, and also they're easy to bow for them. You don't have to use a lot of arm weight. So overall, I think this has been a really exciting string for my studio.
Learn more at contrabassconversations.com/strings, and thanks to D'Addario for sponsoring the podcast. Whenever anybody's going to the Midwest, and I lived in Chicago, Illinois for years and years, I tell them to go to A440. If they're looking for a bow, if they're looking for a bass, if they need some repairs done, if they have a student who's looking for an instrument, A440 has been serving the community for years and years. They're located just west of Wrigley Field in beautiful Chicago. They do great work, and they've been a big supporter of bass events over the years, whether it's the Chicago Bass Festival or really any bass event. A440, you guys rock. Check them out at a440violinshop.com.
So I'm curious, and we're just saying the scene. So we're here at Gary's home with Harmon, and remember your 3 dogs' names again, because they're making guest appearances.
Yeah. Shiro, which means white in Japanese. Sumi, which is charcoal. The calligraphy and the ink that they use is charcoal ink, and that's called sumi. And then the other dog's name is Chai. Sounds like tea, but yeah.
Well, you've got this. You spent your whole career looking out a window, practicing. You got this gorgeous view here in Las Vegas of the mountains, and then you go outside in the morning and practice pretty much every day.
Yeah, I love to practice in the sun, and I'm not going to take a regular bass out there in the sun. It's not good for the instrument, but I have an alter ego bass, which is a skeletal bass, and I stand behind a chair with a high back so that the body of the skeletal bass, the little wood that there is still in the shade for most part.
And Jim modified the skeleton, so it feels exactly like his hand bass.
It feels like my hand bass.
Okay.
And doesn't have any sound, so it's really a great way to focus on proprioceptivity.
Yeah.
Because you're not, it's very unaural, mostly physical. And and I love to practice outside. And the other thing is, it's like looking out the window. It's very calming. Nature is calming. And always when I traveled, when I checked in, I said, I don't care what the beds are, I don't care what anything is, I just need a good window to look out of, because I spent a lot of time looking out of the window. And for that reason, it's calming. The other thing, too, is if you're memorizing music, it's a nice way. You look out the window, you don't have the music in front of you, so I memorize most everything I play. So.
And when you play outside, is it about an hour, longer, shorter? Do you have, is it fairly consistent?
I don't want to stand in the sun, sit in the sun, play in the sun for more than an hour. Okay. So I do about an hour.
So I'm sure people would be fascinated and would be yelling at me if I didn't ask this. But what does Gary Karr do with that hour? What's the first thing you do when you take that bass outside and play? What are you playing?
I would say probably what I've done for most of my life is the first 20 minutes, sometimes 25 minutes. It's warm-up. I start with thirds.
With thirds?
Yeah. I do a lot of double stops as warm-up. Because double stops, first of all, from a bowing standpoint, is twice as hard as a single note. And the second thing is that intonation-wise, it's much more challenging than a single note. So I do scales and thirds, usually 4 scales in patterns in thirds all the way up and down. And I do scales in sixths, the second octave, all in 6 using 2 different fingerings, 1 and 3, and thumb and 2.
Okay.
And I do scale patterns, I'm not going da 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 da, you da 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 da, that. And then I do more scale, scale patterns across the strings and so on and so forth. So that's my warm up. Then I usually do in recent years, I do a Paganini piece, which not Moses. It's another. It's another one. And it has 6 variations to it, and it's like my etude. I know if I can get through that, I'm in good shape. So I was doing that almost every day, and that really loosened me up and got my bow going. In the past years, I guess since we came down here, I found going outside in this very dry temperature, when I'm doing thirds and 6, it was really hard on my fingers. I was they were cracking in the sun.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I've never had a finger crack, and it was painful. So I thought, gee, maybe I shouldn't do these thirds high up because it's maybe doing damage to my fingers. So, but I wanted to warm up on something else. So I've memorized 3 Bach suites. So I decided I'm going to start memorizing the other three. So I've been working on the 4th, memorizing the 4th, and so I go out every day. And for the first 20 minutes to 25 minutes, I do nothing but the 4th suite every day.
The 4th suite?
Yeah. No, actually, it's the 5th one.
The 5th suite. The 5th suite. Wonderful.
Yeah, the 5th suite is what I'm doing. And, I have them almost all memorized now. And it's a good challenge. And there's a lot to play, so it's,
There's a lot to play.
Yeah. And bowing-wise, it has lots of double stops. So that's really good. So I'm getting a good, and then after I do that, it's either the warm up or the Bach. Then I concentrate on if I'm learning a new work, I do that, or if I'm going to perform something, I'll play through that. When I played in Amsterdam in May, I did 90 minutes of music nonstop, and all from memory. So I just was going through the program every day, and I'm playing in Texas in a month, and I'm playing on that program 4 songs without words by Mendelssohn. Oh, I just love playing. And talk about proprioceptivity.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm enjoying that so much. I'm learning more and more about the bow. I'm playing a slower bow and closer to the bridge than I've ever played in my life.
Wow.
And it just feels so good. And Schubert Arpeggione, and then Bottesini Grand Duo with violin, and then Bottesini Passione with David Murray.
Wonderful. Oh.
Yeah, all in one recital.
What a great recital.
So I'm practicing that, a couple of those pieces every day.
We should do the Mendelssohn.
Yeah, I should play that for you if you want.
I would love to. I would love to. Yeah. Do that routine, that morning, because I think morning routines are fascinating.
Yeah.
It's how cool that that's. Does that vary the day of a performance? Like you have that 90-minute performance. Are you doing something similar in the morning? Like what sort of bass playing do you do before a major concert?
Well, 90 minutes of music was unusual.
Okay.
And so I knew that I had to practice more than an hour, which is what I normally did all my life, was about an hour.
Yeah.
And so I figured, well, I better do 2 hours of practicing straight through, no stops. So to build up my stamina.
Yeah.
And so I would do the whole program and work and all the exercises and everything. So that added up to 2 hours.
Wow.
But on concert days or in preparation for concerts, I always practiced in the morning of a concert day so I could relax the rest of the afternoon. And I would do an hour in the morning, always.
Well, when we spoke at ISB, you told me the story about these new concertos that were appearing, and now there have been a lot of developments, and the performance is coming. But just to recap, if people haven't heard that, which they should definitely go listen to, but could you just maybe tell the story of playing with the Rainbow Symphony and being how these commissions came to be?
Yeah, that was a whole lot of fun, playing with the Rainbow Symphony in San Francisco, of all places. It was really a lot of fun. And after the concert, and I played Kuzovitsky there. And after the concert, I signed CDs, and there were a lot of people gathered around. So I was a busy guy, and this man that I had never met before came up to me and wanted to have a chat. And I obviously couldn't really spend any time with him. And he said to me, "Do you take commissions?" And I didn't know really what he was talking about. So I gave him my card. And he called me a week later and said, "My name is Roger Arvid Anderson. I'm a sculptor, writer, and photographer. And I have a new project in my life that means a lot to me because I love music. And I would like to commission composers to write concertos that will be played a lot. Concertos that audiences are going to love. These concertos have to be really melodic. These concertos have to be compelling and captivating and exciting. And I am, since I'm going to be paying for all this, they have to please me. So I'm the director, and I will choose the composer. Well, I mean, I'd never heard of anything like that before, but all the ways he was describing the concerto is what every soloist would like, you know, especially me when he said the word melodic. So I said, well, great, fine. So he starts emailing me and he's sending me samples of various composers that he's going to commission. Not for me to make a choice. He's going to make the choice. So he decided to start with Richard Marriott, who lives in both the jazz and classical world. He writes a lot of music for movies and so on and so forth, which is a good thing because throughout my life, having grown up in Hollywood, I knew I could always depend on movie composers to get it right the first time. Mm-hmm. If they're not a movie composer, they're very lazy about accuracy. But movie composers have to be dead on, dead accurate. They can't make mistakes. It costs too much money. So I thought that was a good thing, Richard Marriott. Wow, okay. And then they sent me samples of his music. It was melodic and kind of jazzy and fun. And I thought, okay, good, you know. Fine. So they showed up just last week. First time I ever met Richard. Second time I met Roger. And they spent a whole week here. And he's really finishing off writing his concerto at the house and trying measure by measure with me. I've never had that in my whole career. And not only have I not had the luxury of working with a composer to make everything as playable as possible, because one of the things that Roger insisted on is that the part not be so difficult that I'm the only one who could play it. Mm-hmm. It had to be something that was accessible to everybody. And so I was able to iron out any technical problems that my other bassist players might confront or see as too much of a challenge. And so the piece is really playable, really extremely playable. And I've never been in a circumstance where I had a third party saying, I don't like that, or that's not melodic enough. He decided that Roger decided that the title of the concerto is going to be Klezmer Concerto No. 1. And Klezmer music was Jewish gypsy music. That's my own description of it. But he also, when he was writing me emails, he said, well, klezmer, and also he used the word freilach, which is another Yiddish term for a very sad, kind of very, very melodic, sad sort of song. Not a song, not sort of, a song, Jewish song, that usually is written in harmonic minor. Mm-hmm. And so that has to be in there too. So he's calling the shots on this, and it was just great. I mean, you know, I have never asked a composer to do anything. I always felt shy about that because I figured I'm getting into someone else's territory. I mean, you know, I want them to be creative on their own ground.
Yeah.
But Roger didn't see it that way. He feels that he should be included in the creative process. So, as an example, I started making suggestions, which I've never done in my whole life. I said, how about, you haven't written a cadenza, and I think there should be a cadenza in the concerto. He hadn't thought of that much about it. I said either in first movement or the third movement or both. And I have a suggestion, maybe even in the third movement. Instead of making it a virtuosic display, which is what cadenzas usually do, why not do a freilach? Why not suddenly stop this spectacular fireworks that you have going on in the orchestra and everything, and shock everybody with a very sad song for bass and harp, and then finish the piece off with the fireworks. And Roger, who was sitting in the room when I said that, said, "That is a great idea. I love it. I love it. I love it." And Richard said, "That's a great idea. I never thought of doing anything like that." So what does Roger do? Roger is a poet, and so he spends the next week writing the lyrics to the Freilach. Not that I'm going to sing it, or not going to use the words, but he wanted to give the composer the feeling of the piece with the words. So now he has the words.
That's great.
And they're beautiful. It's very moving. Yeah.
And you've got a premiere coming up.
And I'm going to premiere it with the Gonzaga Orchestra in Spokane. And then and they're talking about my playing it again in San Francisco with the Rainbow Orchestra, and in Oakland with the Oakland Symphony.
Yeah.
And I think bass players are going to just go wild over this.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. Wow. Well, Gary, the Life on the G String came out last year, I believe, right? 2017.
Yeah, it was at the ISB. The launch was at the ISB 50th anniversary.
So if anybody hasn't picked up, we talked about it when we chatted last, but definitely pick it up. It's a great read. I need to remember to bring my copy so I can get a signature. But pick that up, and looking forward to checking out this new concerto and the ones to come. And congratulations.
You're going to have to play it.
I am all about that. Yeah, my wife, having that harp and bass cadenza, my wife would be thrilled.
Yeah. How cool is that?
I know.
Well, but don't forget, Jason, whatever Mary wrote in Life on the G String, I'm the one who knows all the rest.
Oh! That is a good note to end. I like that.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Harmon. Thank you, Madeleine, for the great idea. What fun. I had such a great time. I hope you enjoyed listening. I know you enjoyed listening. And again, I'll reiterate what I said at the beginning of the episode. If you're not a member of this great organization, the ISB, the International Society of Bassists, that Gary Karr started over 50 years ago at this point, go ahead and join. Join me, join Gary, join all of us here at ISB, and be a part of this community, be a part of this journey, be a part of this story. And if you do join, like I said at the beginning, send me a message, feedback@contrabassconversations.com, and let me know you joined. I have a special something that I will send along. Happy to do that. But what the big benefits are everything that the organization itself offers. And if this is your first episode, maybe it is, you have many that you can listen to in our archives. They're all available at our website, contrabassconversations.com. And I love experimenting with this format and doing different types of episodes. Obviously, this was a bit of a different type of episode, hanging out at Gary Karr's place. That's a different kind of episode. But if you have any ideas for any topics or any panel discussions or any highlight episodes or any guests or anything like that, reach out to me and let me know. And if you have not subscribed to the podcast, there are so many different ways you can do it, from just getting our free app through subscribing in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Stitcher, and that's all listed at our website, contrabassconversations.com. This podcast is produced by a wonderful team of folks. We have Steve Hinchy and Michael Cooper, audio editing, and we have Mitch Mooring as our audio engineer, Trevor Jones, publication and promotion, and I am your host, Jason Heath, coming to you from beautiful San Francisco, California, where we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.